Let's get a muffler on that. Oh. Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane, and it's the morning of Thursday, 1st of March, 2018, and the temperature is around about -5 or 6 out here in the wilds of North Nottinghamshire, about 50 miles north of Nottingham, but just about 7 miles to the east of Doncaster. And as you can see, we've still got our covering of snow. The temperature hasn't risen above freezing for the last, 24 hours at least now, and I think it's pretty much the same right across the country. And regrettably, I have to announce that the meeting in Dorking tonight, or this afternoon rather, where the Environment Agency and the Health and Safety Executive were going to blag about how they were going to protect the environment and the community from the rigours of fracking by Europa. That meeting has been postponed, and I can pretty much guarantee that there's been massive sighs of relief at the Environment Agency and the HSE as they were gearing up for a very, very informed public to be grilling them. And of course, it would be very evident to most people there that they simply were blagging. Anyway, that meeting will be rearranged. Sorry, it's blowing a hoolie here. And anyway, yesterday I posed the question as to whether it was myself or Theresa May that was not well. In fact, even perhaps mentally ill. Me, because a lot of people can't understand why it is that I and many others are out here in the wilds in the middle of winter in an attempt to change a government direction. Well, of course, our colleagues in Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland have all achieved tremendous successes in getting their governments to put effective bans on the exploitation of unconventional hydrocarbons. But here in England, we have a much harder battle, as Theresa May demonstrated yesterday that I think, Theresa, it is seriously yourself that is not well, and for you to behave in the way you do and to make the statements that you do, you are either literally living in another reality, or you are taking medication which puts you in that other reality. But it was evident in Prime Minister's questions yesterday that you are simply not capable of comprehending the concerns that people have right across the country on many, many issues, I have to say, but not least on fracking. And yesterday, Mike Amesbury, who is the Labour MP for Weaver Vale in Cheshire, and he posed a question, and he said, basically following one of his constituents contacting him because INEOS were effectively attempting to bully her into signing a contract enabling them to come onto her property to conduct seismic testing. And he said, does the PM know what it feels like to get an unsolicited letter from a group, INEOS, who will not take no for an answer? And will she join the Welsh and Scottish governments by saying no to fracking in England? Well, anybody who expected Theresa May to answer the question obviously hasn't been paying attention. But her response actually shows the degree to which she is devoid of any connect with the British people. And her response, and I'll give it in full here, she said, shale gas extraction could be a very important part of ensuring energy security in this country. And I'm sure all the honourable gentleman's constituents and the constituents of others represented in this House will want to ensure the government are doing everything they can to make sure we maintain our energy security and we do not see the lights being turned off. Now, this is classic, but actually quite poor, neuro-linguistic programming, because what she is doing there is using the fear porn card of lights going out. Just like Rupert Murdoch did in 1992, when Neil Kinnock looked like an absolute shoo-in to the office of Prime Minister with a Labour government following the disaster of John Major's administration. But the Sun headline was, "Would the last person to leave Britain please turn out the lights?" And that fear porn headline managed to sway sufficient people in the media, in the general population, to vote for Major to get back into office. Fortunately, the lamestream media doesn't have that kind of influence today, thanks to an increasing number of people turning elsewhere for their information. But what Theresa has done here is use the same crass attempt at neuro-linguistic programming and patronisingly suggesting that anybody who dared to challenge her policy on pushing ahead with shale gas exploitation was effectively undermining the energy security of this country. Well, obviously, she is not reading her own reports or reports produced for her government. But that's not really too surprising, because increasingly those who are have the misfortune of getting close to her do suggest that actually she is an intellectual lightweight and is not capable of absorbing information for more than literally just a few minutes, and will do exactly as she's told. Of course, that's why the inquiry into child abuse in this country just keeps getting kicked down the road, with a new chairman being appointed every 5 minutes, so that the inquiry never actually gets anywhere close to the truth. And of course, here she has no desire to know the truth, because she is a whore to the corporations, as indeed are many of her government. And if you wanted to get a further insight into the sociopathy of the Tory party, then look no further than the tweet that Liz Truss put out following Prime Minister's questions yesterday. And she said, "Good to see the Prime Minister supporting fracking against a NIMBY question." Well, let's put a few things in perspective here. Liz Truss is MP for South Norfolk, which basically has 0 shale gas deposits, and also has the good fortune to be able, or her county has the fortune to be able to provide potentially the silica, the sand needed for the frack process. So NIMBY protecting her community with her statement challenging other NIMBYs. But Liz Truss was the Minister of State at DEFRA when the DEFRA report was suppressed, and she contrived with her boss Andrea Leadsom, I think it is actually, I may have mispronounced that, but Andrea Leadsom, to suppress the DEFRA report deliberately until after Lancashire County Council had taken their vote on whether or not to permit Quadrilla to drill and frack at Prestonby Road and at Rossiter. Well, of course, that report was subsequently released, but in the first instance it was released with some 80-odd sections redacted, blacked out, and the entire section on the impact on rural house prices removed completely. Now, that report was eventually revealed, and it's very telling. And Liz Truss said, well, it was only a draft. So this is a classic tactic of government, of suppression of anything that basically would contravene or potentially undermine their push for a particular agenda. So this is Liz Truss, another whore to the corporations. And you know, it has been said that the people get the government they deserve. So consequently, perhaps it's actually time to try to do things differently. And instead of abdicating and just passing responsibility to these major decisions to central government, it's actually time to get involved And the British government knows that more and more people are getting involved. They are taking an interest. And in fact, the unconventional gas, the fracking agenda, is a portal for many, many people to get involved. But, you know, the battle is not over, because there are moves to remove all decision making regarding fracking from local authorities and pull it in under the essential national infrastructure label, where local authorities would no longer be able to participate in any of the decision making. And in fact, the Communities and Local Government Select Committee has been seeking submissions on whether fracking should be treated as national infrastructure. Now, they are expected to release a report sometime over the next literally 4 to 6 weeks. But you know, Andrea Leadsom has stated that major shale gas planning decisions should be the responsibility of the national planning regime, and then it wouldn't fall under the Minister for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. It would actually fall under the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government. And who's that? Oh, another whore to the corporations, Saeed Javid, the man who rode roughshod over the democratic decision taken by Lancashire County Council to reject Quadrilla's application to frack at Preston New Road. And PNR, of course, he overturned it. And, you know, look at what's going on right now. And he also said, of course, that he's minded to overturn the decision and allow Quadrilla to start drilling and fracking at Rossiter. And funnily enough, there's not too much mention right now in Parliament or amongst government circles of the situation at Kirkby Misperton, where, of course, Third Energy, or Barclays Bank, trading as Third Energy, were found seriously wanting, and not least their financial resilience did not stand up to any scrutiny. And in fact, even a child of 10 could have seen that, you know, if you've got a pound a week coming in, but you owe over £100, then the likelihood of you being able to pay that debt off anytime soon is basically zero. Well, that's the situation at Kirkby Misperton, because Third Energy had revenues of about £500,000 from the money paid to them for keeping the Knapton power station ready to kick in should the country need it. But yet they had a debt of over £50 million, so 100 times their annual revenue. So this is what we're up against here. And, you know, the British government is hoping that this war of attrition will be won because people will get bored, people go away, people, you know, won't stick with living in fields in the middle of winter. Well, for myself and a considerable number of others, this is our 4th winter challenging this insidious agenda. We had a year off in 2015/16 whilst everything was ticking through. But, you know, 4 or 5 years ago it was Barton Moss, then Crawberry Hill, then last year it was Kirkby Misperton, and now here at Misson Springs. And you know what? If we don't shut this down, then we'll be wherever it is we need to be to help raise awareness within the local community of what this industry has done everywhere in the world. And you know what? I think we're very, very close to a tipping point here, because there is now so much information in the public domain, and, you know, people are starting to realize that their politicians are literally lying, barefaced lying, and are in total denial of the sheer volume of evidence that is freely available in the public domain, which of course is why the governments are trying to restrict the alternative media. And people can see for themselves that their politicians are incapable of fundamental truth. And if they're lying about this, then what else are they lying about? Well, in reality, they're actually lying about most things. And you know, as people scratch the surface and they realize that what's happening is the politicians are the puppets of the global banksters and the global corporatists, and they are filching the wealth of nations and moving it into the offshore bank accounts of a smaller and smaller number of people. This is a game of global monopoly. Now, most people have played Monopoly, of course, but very, very few have played it to the ultimate conclusion. And of course, the objective of the game of Monopoly is total ownership of the board. You know, when families play it at Christmas time, after about 2 or 3 days, they're normally bored and they simply total up to see who's accumulated the most wealth, and whoever has the most wealth is declared the winner. But that's not the purpose of the game. The purpose of the game is total ownership of everything. And that's exactly what's going on right now. And the sooner people realize that they are being filched of everything that they thought they owned, then just maybe humanity will start to realize that it's actually got to step up to the plate and do something about it, because the prognosis really isn't good at all. Couple with this, the push towards universal credit, which is the first step to a universal basic income. And the moment you sign up to universal basic income, you are a slave to the state. Whoa! And a slave to the corporations. So we are in a very, very challenging but very interesting time. You know, people have assumed for too long that their government is there to take care of them. Well, now perhaps they are really waking up to the fact that their government is there to protect the interests of the global banksters and the global corporations. And you know, my father's generation, the generation of people that are now in their 80s and 90s, you know, they had some pretty good years through the 50s, 60s and 70s, and then we had Reaganomics and Thatcherism, and that's the start of the rot. And you know, basically our generation, those in their 50s and 60s, or 40s, 50s and 60s, actually need to realize that the legacy that we are at risk of leaving future generations really doesn't bear thinking about. It really is time to step up to the plate. And talking of which, yesterday Rotherham Borough Council continued in their resistance to INEOS. Whoa! Continued their resistance to INEOS and put out a report stating that the INEOS application was deficient in so many areas, but not least they failed to carry out sufficient surveys of the wildlife, of badgers, bats and breeding birds to support its plans for shale gas exploration at Woodsets. Are you surprised? The corporations don't give a flying frack about the ecology, and your government of whores to the corporatocracy doesn't give a flying frack about you or me or our children or our children's children. So on a day that the UK basically shuts down because we got a few strong winds and a couple of inches of snow, and schools are shut down in this area, I know, but take the opportunity. Hopefully the internet infrastructure holds up to the storms, and you can use the time that you're not able to get to work by encouraging others to do their own research and start to see the magnitude of the assault on the population of this country. Well, I think I'm going to get back into the warm. So enjoy your day as best you can. Maybe take the opportunity, spend the time with your family, talk to your family about what's occurring, and whatever whatever calls you pick up, and there are many, but it's time to actually do something and stop just talking about it. So all being equal, I'll be back with you tomorrow at 8:30. You have a great day.